Do you know what happened in 1826? It was the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Does anybody know anything?
Jefferson and Adams died on July 4th.
Yes.
My relative signed it.
What's that?
My relative signed it.
Oh, your relative signed the Declaration. Good.
Yeah.
Good. And who would that be?
I'd have to ask my aunt.
Okay,
She's the one
okay.
that does the genealogy.
Okay. But this, what's that?
I was just going to say the Second Great Awakening in that time frame.
Yes, yeah, that would have been going on as well. Yeah, yeah. But the important thing there, as far as the national thing, was the fact that people looked at it as an indication of divine providence upon the America, that Jefferson and Adams lived to the 50th anniversary, the Jubilee, as it's called, okay, from the Bible, okay, the Jubilee of our country, and that they lived that long and they died together on the same day. And of course, Jefferson and Adams, Adams was like at the end of the Federalists, and Jefferson was a Democrat, and they actually had served together, but they became competitors really politically. However, there are books out there that you can buy that have their correspondence. They took up a correspondence till they died, and wrote back and forth to them and discussed really what had happened. You know, the great ideas that brought our country together, and both of them also, there are some things there that they matured about their understanding of God and so forth. And I'm not going to say personally either one had the same evangelical faith as I had, but there's still maturity there. And things of Jefferson commended the reading of the Bible, okay, and told young people that he counseled in other correspondence and stuff that they should read the Bible. And his attitude was believe as much as you can. It was sort of his philosophy. But nonetheless, there's a whole appreciation there that at least is sympathetic to our Judeo-Christian viewpoint. And in Adams's case, I am sure that John Quincy Adams, his son, was a believer, and I think John Quincy Adams had an impact upon his dad, especially toward the end of his life. John Quincy Adams had devotions all the time out of the Greek New Testament. Okay, if you read about John Quincy, he's a very interesting person. But what is really interesting, and of course this is so in contrast to the presentation today of the liberals, the legal group. ACLU. That's what I'm trying to think. When I was in Northampton, the representative of the ACLU in the Western, there was a man. He was a lawyer in the area, and he was on the radio all the time. And Bill Newman was his name. Bill Newman, and he had a radio program, and he was spouting all kinds of things about America and what separation of church and state and all that. So I got to debating him on email and stuff. Eventually, he let me on his radio program, and so we had some interesting debates and so forth. But a guy like that was always hiding from the people that, like, when Jefferson and Adam died, the people at Washington felt that ought to be commemorated with a religious service. And so they planned to have a sermon delivered in the capital of the United States on the Lord's Day, July the 16th, 1826, at the request of the citizens of Washington on the death of Mr. Washington and Mr. Adams. Do you know who preached that sermon? William Staughton. okay, the Baptist man we're looking at, okay? And the reason he was there to preach that sermon was because he had been in Philadelphia, and a guy by the name of Luther Rice had come back. He had been a partner with Judson over in India, and they became Baptists, so he came back to America to rally the Baptists. Well, this guy was a visionary, okay? He not only started all these Baptist societies all over the country in every little town and hamlet and so forth, and then they organized in what became known as the Triennial Convention in 1814 in Philadelphia, where Staughton was the pastor, okay? And so he was involved in that organization. But then besides that, he saw the need that we needed to train people to be better pastors, better missionaries, and he wanted the Baptists to have influence on America, so he thought that all this should be organized in Washington, D.C. And so he started what was called the Columbian College. And William Stoughton was like Lawrence Brown and other people that was already involved with training pastors and so forth. So he got William Stoughton to come to Washington to head the Columbian College that they started down there. So that got William Stoughton there, and twice the United States Senate elected him as their chaplain, okay? So in 1826 he was the chaplain of the Senate, and he was a noted orator. I mean, he was a man that was gifted like Charles Spurgeon. You know, that'd be the comparison I would make. Even from the time that he was first in Bristol Baptist College as a young man, he started going out and preaching, and when he graduated, he started getting invitations to become the pastor of the most noted churches in the area and so forth, replace guys that were like legends, you know. And he's just a young guy that just graduated, but he decided to come to America instead. You know, God led him, you know. He had these invitations to become a pastor of a great church there in England, but he came to America. Well, at any rate, so that's how he got there, and preached that sermon. And I think I put a little bit of that in your paper, but we'll get to that, and we can come back to more of it. But we'll go back to the beginning about Stoughton, and he was born in 1770 in Coventry, Warwickshire, England, and his parents were members of the Baptist Church at Coventry. His father was a deacon and exhorter in the church. When he was very young, he wrote poems which were published and thought to indicate great native talent. Young William also exhibited pride in trying to confound his father with difficult questions, as he regularly reviewed the pastor's sermons in the home with his children. So they, you know, on Sunday they went to church a couple of times, but when they came home, they got more, because the father, you know, William was the oldest child, but he went over what they learned in church and stuff. I mean, they had a real Christian culture in their home, and they were really trying to influence, the parents were trying to influence the children, but William tried to make it difficult. He recognized it was his pride and his old sinful nature. He wasn't saved yet, and so he tried to find questions that would perplex his father and so forth, and just sort of cantankerous, and then prideful. Okay, in 1784, he was sent to Birmingham to the home of Mr. Claybrook to learn the trade of a silversmith. His mind was filled with vanity, but he attended a sermon on "Prepare to Meet Thy God," Amos 4:12. Over several months, the thoughts from the sermon in his conscience produced an intense mental conflict that reduced him to sickness. I mean, he was in bed. He was just a waste, and like wasting away. And one day, while upon his bed, his distress was relieved finally by the thought of the invitation of Isaiah 1:18. You know, come to me. You know, and so. I can't quote that right now. It just won't come to me.
Let us reason together.
Yeah, come now, let us reason together. Yes, though your sins be as scarlet. Yeah, and so forth. And Christ met his need through that verse, and his condition before God was made new, and this is from the biography by his son-in-law. It was as though heaven had been opened upon my vision. I found him whom my soul loveth. What a testimony. And he went to live with his godly grandmother, Mrs. Anna Staughton. Again, a wonderful believer. And he lived with her to recover his health. And of course, she ministered. And there was a Reverend Cole there that helped him with counsel. So then he returned to Birmingham. And he was baptized by Reverend Samuel Pierce at the Cannon Street Church, and he was sent to the Bristol Baptist College. Now, it's important that his pastor was this Samuel Pierce, because Samuel Pierce fellowshiped with the Northamptonshire ministers, which involved William Carey, okay? And all these people that became William Carey's partners in sending him to missions. So this Samuel Pierce took William Staughton with him. Okay? And so October the 2nd, 1792, he attended the organization of the Particular Baptist Society for the Propagation of the Gospel Among the Heathen, Kettering, with Pastor Pierce. There's the building where they organized in England, in Kettering, this Particular Baptist Society for the Propagation of the Gospel. And so again, I mentioned there, these people are Calvinists, okay? I'm a Calvinist, like Jesus and Paul, okay? That the Spirit must draw, and the Holy Spirit must convict, and He saves us. We do not save ourselves, and we do not have to keep ourselves, okay? And so forth. But I am not covenant theology. I am not Reformed, okay? I'm a Baptist. I'm dispensational, okay? But in the doctrine of sociology, I believe in the foreknowledge, the election of God, and so forth. I don't dismiss that from the Bible, and so forth. So these people were like that. And these people were missionary and evangelistic. So when you read in books, my friend Dr. Cummins, I recommend his 2 volumes that are This Day in Baptist History that he did with Thompson, and then his 3rd volume that he published by himself. He was my friend, and I was working with him on some projects when he died. We never finished them. And but when he writes in some of his entries and tells that the problem with the churches and stuff is Calvinism, he should be saying hyper-Calvinism, okay? Calvinism, the proper view of doctrine of soteriology, is biblical theology, okay? And we're not Arminians. And these people that did all this work that everybody looks to, you know, as the foundation of Baptist missions and so forth, and all, you've got evangelists and stuff running around America and stuff, they're talking about Adam, John, Judson and so forth, but they're against Calvinism. They don't know what they're talking about, okay? And so I'm not a hyper-Calvinist is someone who is not carrying out the Great Commission. They are disobedient to the Great Commission. That's hyper-Calvinism. We are not hyper-Calvinists, okay? But we're not part of the new Calvinism, too. There's some stuff going on today that's ecumenical. It doesn't have personal separation. It's got other problems. And if you want to know what it is, go to the American Council of Christian Churches website, download the brochure of the resolution that they passed called New Calvinism. There are some problems today. I am opposed to that kind of Calvinism too, okay? That's John Piper and some other people and so forth. And so those are the extremes. You got the hyper-Calvinists that are disobedient to the Great Commission, and that was going on at Carey's day and Stoughton's day, and these people reacted to it, you know, and followed Andrew Fuller and some other people, and William Carey himself. I mean, Carey himself explained it himself, you know, and so forth, that we have to not only pray for salvation, but we have to use means to bring it about, okay, which is missions, okay, and evangelism, so forth. So I say all that. He attended the organization of the Particular Baptist Society for the propagation of the gospel amongst the heathen in Kettering with Pastor Pierce. His pastor, also a graduate of Bristol College, became one of the leaders of the PBS, this society for missions. Even though he was a penniless student, he pledged a half guinea to become part of the society to send forth William Carey. That was the minimum amount that you could be part of the society, you see, that you had to contribute that much. He borrowed the money because he got excited about missions, okay? He wanted to be part of it, you know. And this is the amazing thing. This is the amazing thing. He was there when missions was born of the Baptists, you see, and the Calvinism got the right direction of biblical balanced Calvinism that has Calvinistic soteriology, but it also has obedience to the Great Commission, okay? And so he had to borrow to fulfill his pledge. He later counted this the greatest gift he ever gave. He never forgot this. It affected him. He graduated from Bristol College, where he prepared for the pastoral ministry. He had opportunities to preach while studying, and his labors were highly acceptable and commanded large assemblies. This is why I'm comparing him to Charles Spurgeon. He had oratorical ability, okay? He was just a giant to listen to, okay? William Carey visited the Baptist Church in Birmingham and stayed for a week with Pastor Pierce. March the 20th, William Carey had a farewell meeting at Leicester with the Society and the Northamptonshire pastors. Pastor Pierce and William Staughton were there. Staughton received several invitations from churches to their pulpits. He was called to Northampton to seek to Dr. John Ryland, the new principal of Bristol College. This would have been a prestigious position for him to take. But it wasn't God's will. He turned it down, you see. And so in the autumn, he instead moved to America to accept a call to Georgetown, South Carolina. And he married Marion Handsome in a service presided by Richard Furman. Okay, here's another one of the giants in Baptist history in America. Furman University is named after him, of course. And after 18 months, he moved north to pastor at Bordentown, New Jersey, and serve as principal of a seminary. He really didn't like the South as far as the climate and so forth. That didn't agree well with him. So he sought another opportunity, moved north, and he was president of seminary at Bordentown, New Jersey, and then he attended the Philadelphia Baptist Association. Again, this is a Calvinistic group of preachers. This is the most influential association. It's the first association and the most influential association on early American Baptists, because they sent out people from their association that went out and preached and worked all over the country and helped organize other associations and so on. And there's a book on all the early history of the Philadelphia Baptist Association. And he wrote a circular letter for the association on infidelity, because Thomas Paine was then residing in that area of New Jersey. And Thomas Paine was great in the Revolution, okay, and his important pamphlets that he wrote. But later in life, even Benjamin Franklin, one of his things, Paine sent the manuscript to Franklin, and he sent it back to him. He said, "You better burn this. You are going to make yourself anathema to everybody." And he did. We don't even know today where Thomas Paine is buried. You don't see monuments to Thomas Paine because of what, after he was over in the French Revolution over there. He, in fact, he could have died over there except for Thomas Jefferson advocating for him and got him freed. He went to England for a while, but he still came over back with this agnosticism and French infidelity and all this stuff. And his end of his life was a very sad thing. So he was ordained at Bordentown 1797. William Rogers, again, this is another important figure. He was a chaplain in the Revolution. and so forth. He preached on, go you into all the world to preach the gospel, Mark 16:15. He's invited to Burlington. Again, he's a principal over a large and flourishing academy, so he's always involved with education as well as preaching. They supplied the best young men to Princeton College. Princeton bestowed on him the Doctor of Divinity, and he was advocating for the founding of a Baptist Missionary Society in America to cooperate with the English in sending missionaries to the heathen. So he's in community. He kept corresponding, and we want to recognize this is I'm emphasizing missions in these people that we're featuring here, but this is a missionary pastor. The missionary movement doesn't work without pastors that are having missionaries come in their church and working with the missionary work. And you can't find a better example. This is a man that was there when Baptist Missions was founded in England, okay? And he came to America and he brought this passion with him, okay? And he's communicating to people. He's writing about it, and so he lost his son. He toured out in Ohio. They wanted him to come out. He went out and checked it out, and he came back and began filling in First Baptist Church of Philadelphia, and Philadelphia then became a center of his work for many, many years. He was called to the First Baptist Church of Philadelphia. Revival followed. The church had to build. He added 100 members by letter, 300 by baptism. They built a building on the Schuylkill River to use at the time of the baptisms. They started 2 new churches, the Third Baptist and the First African of Philadelphia. He wrote in a letter, "Our society meetings are overflowing and great numbers of young people are weeping over sin or are exulting in a precious Savior. We have now at our house 2 brethren from the Serampore Mission House near Calcutta." That's Serampore was the Dutch colony, and Adoniram Judson, William Ward, John Marshman, this was their center of operation over there for many, many years. And so he's got these people there in his church. They are on their way to England. I have written to Dr. Ripon on the subject, who will communicate the intelligence to the Missionary Society. John Ripon, of course, again, is a great Baptist in England, and he's responsible for Ripon's collection, the hymn books that many were used in the Baptist churches here in America. And he had supported the American Revolution, by the way, as an Englishman. He daily instructed, this is back to Staughton, he daily instructed youth preparing for the ministry. On Sunday he preached 4 sermons. The morning service at 6 a.m. was outdoors in the southern part of the city near the Swedes Church under a large beech tree, outdoor. Frequently 800 to 1,000 persons assembled there, including many seamen. Often great movements of the Holy Spirit were experienced with weeping. He had extensive usefulness in counseling and aiding other churches in the city. Evangelism was conducted through prayer meetings at the home of Mrs. Bright on Lombard Street. These were crowded with solemn and attentive hearers. Many who joined the First Baptist Church were either awakened or obtained peace in believing at these meetings. Then 1811 he resigned from that church, but they were expanding and going to start another church at a place called the Sansom Street Baptist Church, and they first used other buildings, and eventually they built a building of their own. And again, this church enjoyed wonderful success. He preached only twice on Sundays for his health and utilized 2 men who could improve their ability to preach. So again, these were other men he was bringing along, and had them preaching as well, giving them experience. He met on Saturday evenings with persons distressed on account of their sins. His sermons and exhortations at baptisms and the Lord's Supper were noted for his gift of utterance. As a preacher of the everlasting gospel, he had no superior, it was said of him at that time. He continued to train youth for the ministry. The Baptist Education Society of the Middle States was organized. 1813, he was elected tutor of that society. Young men who were licensed by Baptist churches were invited into his home, where he lectured and heard their recitations in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, and other appropriate branches of study. And let me tell you, they had 4 children of their own, but he had one great wife, let me tell you. because she took all these people in and treated just like they were in the family. And I've actually seen letters from these students writing back so that the son-in-law could incorporate them in the book and so forth, telling of their experience and what they learned from his wife, okay? Because his wife was teaching them how to be real gentlemen, teaching them what to look for in a wife, and just all of these, wonderful exhortations and so forth, that she had a tremendous ministry as well. And she was willing to do all this stuff. I mean, she is keeping her husband going, This guy's going here and yon, and she's keeping him going. And they're raising children of their own, and they've got all these young men in their home, and this kept on, and even when they were in Washington, okay, later on. Well, let's see. He preached the sermon for the funeral of Samuel Jones, another great Baptist from the Philadelphia area. 51 years, Baptist church at Pennapeck, PA. He delivered a eulogy for Dr. Benjamin Rush, who signed the Declaration again. And Staughton gave lectures on like botany and medicine and so forth, some of that. So these medical students that were studying, he had worked with Benjamin Rush in this as well, okay, that he was giving lectures to medical students, and so he knew Benjamin Rush well, and so forth there in Philadelphia. He aided in the founding of the Philadelphia Bible Society. He was the recording secretary, later one of the vice presidents. He proposed and assisted in the founding of the first female Bible Society of Philadelphia. For some time he was director of a school for young ladies. He gave lectures on sacred history and botany. This was in various schools and things. In 1814, this is 33 delegates met at the First Baptist Church of Philadelphia to form the General Missionary Convention for the Baptist denomination in the United States for foreign mission. This was the fruit of the labors of Luther Rice, who had returned from Burma to enlist Baptist churches to support the Judson. William Staughton was chosen as the corresponding secretary, serving until 1826. He attended all meetings of the Missionary Convention. His was the hand that gave direction to the movements of the body and contributed so successfully under the divine blessing to its prosperity and usefulness. To encourage the missionaries in their work was his delight. Now, he was very important to the founding of this society. He was the only person who had been at the founding of the particular Baptist Society in England, who was also at the founding of this American General Missionary Convention of the Baptist denomination of the United States and foreign missions. And he could tell these people of his communications with Sutcliffe, with Andrew Fuller, with William Carey, okay, and on that he'd been doing over the years. And he brought all this to the American Convention when it started, and they elected him corresponding secretary. So much of what we know in America that was communicated to the churches of Adoniram Judson was because of the correspondence between Adoniram Judson and Staughton, okay? And he continued extensive communications with English brethren and the English Baptist missionaries of India. He was a fundraiser for missions in the churches and the associations, and he wrote a book, The Baptist Mission in India, to raise money for missions. So I never heard a lecture on William Staughton when I went to college, okay? And I had missions course with William J. Hopewell, who's a very good friend of mine as well, a very knowledgeable, wonderful man. And I read, over the years, I'm sure I read Staughton's name when I was reading about what was going on in Philadelphia and the organizations. I never had anybody tell me that this man was at both Kettering and Philadelphia, and that also he preached before the United States Congress. I never knew the import of this man, and that this is a model for a pastor being missionary minded, okay? So I commend him to you, and I hope you'll promote it to others, that we ought to think about William Staughton. And in 1816, one of his students was John Mason Peck, soon to be missionary to the American West. In April 1832, Peck and Jonathan Going of Worcester, Mass. would be leaders in founding the American Baptist Home Missionary Society. So again, you see, Staughton, because of his influence on Peck, not only was involved with foreign missions, but eventually was related to the founding of the Home Mission Society as well. Now, let me get a drink. I get choked up when I talk about John Mason Peck. Luther Rice ran into him, and he was out doing all of his campaigning, starting Baptist Missionary Societies and getting support and so forth. And so he sent John Mason Peck to Staughton. Okay. The reason John Mason Peck then was appointed to the Missouri Territory by this, and he went to St. Louis. But in St. Louis, he had the audacity of having a Sunday school for children, and he didn't care if they were black or they were white. And they ran him out of St. Louis over that. They were bigots, okay? The same bigots that came to Alton, Illinois later and murdered, I can't think of, he was a printer, a publisher, Congregationalist, anyway, Lovejoy. Elijah P. Lovejoy, okay, was murdered in Alton, Illinois because he was an abolitionist. And the people from St. Louis came over and destroyed his fourth printing press, okay. His fourth print. This guy didn't give up, okay. And he was an abolitionist, and he was a friend of John Mason Peck as well. Because eventually John Mason Peck, he came over to the Illinois side to get away from this bigotry in St. Louis, and was working over there, and eventually came to a place called Alton, Illinois, which is my hometown, you know. And he branched out. He had publishing works, and he eventually started a seminary that was called Shirtlift College there, and he started churches. And one of the churches he started was the Upper Alton Baptist Church, and at 12 years of age, my mother was saved in the Upper Alton Baptist Church. That was, of course, after John Mason Peck's day, but my understanding of being a Baptist and the churches that influenced me in my childhood and so forth is all affected by John Mason Peck, and as I've learned over the years, that means it was affected by Luther Rice and William Staughton. So in 1818, they founded the Latter-day Luminary in Washington, D.C., a paper promoting all the mission educational efforts of the General Missionary Convention. Much of the news about Baptist foreign missions came from the reports by Staughton, again, utilizing his correspondence. And the Baptist General Convention in 1820 voted to start Columbian College in Washington, D.C. Now, actually, this was the vision of Luther Rice, and he thought that the Baptists could have a greater influence upon the whole nation by being in Washington. He was wrong, okay? And the people thought, because they needed to put the school where there was strong Baptist help, you know, and so forth. They'd have been better for Massachusetts back then was a powerhouse of Baptist churches, okay? Boston, tremendous powerhouse. Richmond, Virginia, you know, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and so forth. They were wrong that they probably would have been better to have kept the school in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. But they moved it to Washington, and it eventually didn't work out, regardless of the fact that Luther Rice poured his soul into that. And Staughton there was appointed principal of the institution, and Ira Chase, professor of languages and biblical literature, and Staughton, of course, lectured in a bunch of other areas there and so forth. And he traveled back and forth from Philadelphia to Washington for a few weeks at a time till 1823. And he was a member of the American Philosophical Society. And shortly after this appointment, he suffered the loss of his wife Maria, who had had 30 years of harmony and affection. So then the classical department of Columbian College opened 30 students, increased to 46. They built a big building. They had to borrow money for it. His letter of resignation to the Sansom Street Baptist Church in 1823. His farewell sermon was 1 Peter 5:10. And he moved to Washington, assumed the Columbian College. The school kept growing. There were people that wanted to study. Well, Luther Rice was sending students in because he was all over, meeting and so forth. And but the General Convention voted to sever ties to the Columbian College and concentrate its efforts in foreign missions because of the financial difficulties of Columbian College, and they didn't want to divert the funds from the missions to the college. And so Luther Rice is still out there running around trying to keep funding both the missions and the school. And so then I give you here that he became the chaplain of the United States Senate while he was there then, and the Columbian College enrollment went to 93, so they built a second building, borrowed more money, and they were running far ahead of what really the people that were backing them wanted them to do. Okay, but that was basically Luther and William Stoughton. Everything that man had done, he preached, people got saved, and the money came in. So Luther Rice said, we've got more students, we need more room. The Lord's going to supply the money, but they didn't have the money in hand. Okay, so they got way overextended. Okay, but so then. A nice mention here, the college had great financial difficulties. Okay, 1825 to 26, again, he's elected chaplain. This is when he delivers this sermon that I was talking about on the death of Jefferson and Adams. Okay, and I give you a couple of quotes here from the sermon that you can see his testimony about the Savior in the Congress of the United States. He preached this. It would have been in the House chamber at that time. And now in 1826, there, I think I may have skipped over that. They had real difficulties at the Triennial Convention, and there was an examination of Luther Rice and so forth, because especially there was gossip about Luther Rice coming from the hyper-Calvinists that were opposed to missions anyway, okay? And they were saying Luther Rice was getting rich. Luther Rice had no Swiss bank accounts. He had nothing, okay? And so they found that he'd done nothing criminal, but he's on horseback all the time and on buggies and stagecoaches and stuff, and yet he's trying to keep all these records, okay, for the school, for the mission, and so forth. And he fails in a lot of this. It's not well done, and he overextended. So they took the responsibility. They still said, you can go out and raise money, but we're going to control how it's spent, okay? And so Stoughton was embarrassed in some of this, but they still respected Stoughton. You see, in 1820, he was elected the president of the board of managers of the Baptist General Convention, and again in 1829, and served till his death. Okay, so he still continued this important leadership. He was the man that had been with England and America in missions. Okay, so I tell you, he's a great example of a pastor with a missionary heart. And 1827, he went south on a fundraising trip for the college. Letters informed him of the resignation of his friends from the college board. He resigned the presidency while in Charleston, South Carolina. This resulted in the closing of the college and students going home. He stayed in the South for several more weeks. and raise funds for the Burma mission. He returned to Philadelphia to visit his children. The college reorganized and changed its name to George Washington University. That's still in existence today, and eventually was bailed out by Congress and dropped all Baptist affiliation in 1904. And he supplied the pulpit at First Baptist Church of Philadelphia. 1829, he supplied another Baptist church in Philadelphia on New Market Street. He married a young woman, Anna Peel. He was suffering from some illness even at the time of his marriage. He never recovered his strength when he left Philadelphia. September 4th, he was elected president of the proposed Georgetown College, Georgetown, Kentucky, by the Kentucky Baptist Education Society. As he was traveling to take up this new endeavor, he fell sick in Baltimore. He pressed on to Washington and died December 12, 1829, aged 59 years, 11 months, 8 days. He was buried at first in Washington 3 years, and that was a big deal in Washington. When this man was so well respected, it was a big deal in Washington, his funeral. And I didn't put details about that here. But 3 years later, his body was removed to Philadelphia for burial by his first wife, and a fitting monument was erected by his former theological students. They had such respect for him. They wanted the body brought back to Philadelphia, and they raised the monument in 1834. The monument lists his service as pastor in Sansom Street, principal of the Baptist Theological Institution in Philadelphia, the first corresponding secretary of the Baptist Board of Foreign Missions, the first president of Columbian College, president-elect of Georgetown College, Kentucky, an early and efficient friend of foreign missions, a most eloquent and faithful preacher of the gospel, and as a skillful instructor of youth. He was the last witness of the founding of a particular Baptist society, Kettering, October the 2nd, 1792, to die. And let's see, just before we close here, let me go back to his sermon. He used as his text 2 Samuel 1:23, where David lauds the lives of Saul and Jonathan. Lovely and pleasant were they in their lives. In their death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. Toll the bell. Still louder toll it. Convey, ye winds, the funeral sound from the forests of Maine to the savannas of Florida, from the western ocean to the eastern. Jefferson and Adams are no more. No ordinary circumstances have induced us to assemble in our capital this morning. Death may glory in the spoils, which on the 4th of the present month he acquired. But there is a political as well as an evangelistic import in the triumph. Death is swallowed up in victory, 1 Corinthians 15:54. 12 millions of our citizens have received or are receiving the intelligence that two of the greatest statesmen the world ever knew died both on the same day, and that was the day on which the trumpet of our Jubilee was sounding. This interesting fact will become incorporated with the history of our Union and excite the astonishment of future ages. It would seem by this unparalleled providence as if Jehovah were saying to America as to the Hebrew nation, ye shall hallow the 50th year, Leviticus 25:10, okay, which is the same passage on which the inscription of the Liberty Bell is founded, that says, and ye shall hallow the 50th year and proclaim liberty through all the land unto the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee. 1826 is the jubilee, and God sounded it by the death of Thomas Jefferson and John Adams on that day. Dr. Staughton cited the practice of the ancients to celebrate the virtues of the illustrious dead. He held up the text of 2 Samuel 1:17-27 as the first formal eulogy in the Bible. And he said, in contrast, Jefferson Adams did not die in war. They expired on their couches, surrounded with these gentle and solicitous attentions which filial affection and faithful friendship could supply. When the chief magistrate of our country, John Quincy Adams, was president at that time, heard the deep affliction of his beloved parent, he hastened with all rapidity that he might, like Joseph in reference to Jacob, pay the last tribute of filial affection. But he could not command the chariot of lightning or the wings of a whirlwind. He arrived too late. But indeed, not indeed to receive a father's blessing, for that he already had bequeathed. But in nothing else the slaughtered heroes of Israel and the deceased patriots of America can be found to correspond. In this they resemble each other. Lovely and pleasant were they in their lives, and in their death they were not divided. So that's how he incorporated the biblical text to these men, and went over their lives, but used this, as you see in there. He talks about the providence of God for our nation in the quote that I've given you there, that we should be trusting God to raise up the leaders that we need for the future. And of course, the final appeal that we need redemption through the Lord Jesus Christ. He brings that out as well. So I commend again a person that it's only been in recent years that I really recognize the significance of this man in American history and Baptist history, and I hold him out to you as a model of a missionary-minded Baptist pastor.